Ah, X-Men, one of the greatest superhero teams of all time and pioneers of modern comic book movies. Without Bryan Singer's X-Men film back in 2000, we might not have all of the memorable comic book adaptations that have come since. With its themes of responding to evolution and overcoming prejudice, it helped pave the way for these films to be taken seriously, and I personally consider it to be on the same level of significance as Richard Donner's Superman and Tim Burton's Batman. Anyway, the series went through a bit of a resurgence recently with the release of last year's X-Men Days of Future Past, combining the casts of both the original trilogy and the prequel X-Men First Class. Although it definitely took liberties with the source material, it did manage to open up a whole new realm of storytelling possibilities while paying tribute to what came before. Unfortunately, when you have this many characters, some are inevitably going to get more screen time than others. One teammate in particular who got the short end of the stick was Rogue. Oh come on, she was one of the more complex characters in the series. Imagine not being able to share any physical contact with anyone without hurting them. The internalized pain and sense of outcast helplessness that can cause was conveyed effectively by Anna Paquin, so you'll understand why I was disappointed that most of her scenes were cut out of the finished product. On the upside, to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the series, we now have the Rogue Cut, which extends the film by 17 minutes and puts the character back in. So does this new version improve on an already great film? Well, yes and no. I've gotta say, I already like the case better. Look at how much more vibrant and distinctive it is. You can even flip it open like a booklet. It doesn't serve much of a practical purpose, but it does wonders for the presentation. Now, how are the actual contents? Well, let me say that as a benchmark for this type of review, I'll be using the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. These box sets add half an hour to an hour of extra footage, with the exception of An Unexpected Journey, which only adds 13 minutes, to films that are already gargantuan in length and scope. In addition, they come with hours upon hours of special features that show you nearly every step in the process of making these epics. While these movies admittedly might not be everyone's cup of tea, I would still recommend the extended editions over the theatrical versions any day of the week, as they do an excellent job of deepening the world and further fleshing out the characters and story. They keep the narrative in focus while bringing viewers closer to J.R.R. Tolkien's language and vision. The Rogue Cut depends a bit more on personal preference. Both versions are great, but I'm not going to say that you need to watch one over the other. It mainly comes down to whether you place a greater importance on story or character. On one hand, the extended version spends more time in the desolate future setting, giving more screen time to the older X-Men. Characters like Storm and Bishop get a bit more dialogue and have more of an identity than before. Some of this extra material is also used to further establish the ruined state of the world and the sense of hopelessness that permeates throughout. In conjunction, more consideration is given to the concept of time travel and the potentially disastrous consequences, whereas the theatrical cut barely touched on this. Unfortunately, much of the added footage involving the younger characters is just a series of little exchanges and jokes that largely feel unnecessary. The only exception to this is when Mystique comes to the mansion to destroy Cerebro. Although it allows for some decent character interactions between her and Beast, the way that the film arrives at this point is somewhat problematic. In the original version, after Xavier mentally communicates with Raven at the airport, he simply looks through the eyes of one of the passengers to find out which plane she's on. Here, he doesn't do that, because then he would know that she's coming to the mansion instead of the White House. This might result in him getting through to her sooner, and we can't have that before the end of the movie.
The encounter could create a time paradox, the results of which could cause a chain reaction that would unravel the very fabric of the space-time continuum and destroy the entire universe.
However, in spite of these issues, I have to admit that it was enjoyable seeing all of the new footage with Rogue. Sure, it feels kind of like a self-contained episode, but again, it paints a more vivid picture of the future characters and their relationships. We're reminded of the sacrifices that they're all having to make in this last-ditch effort to change history. It's fairly compelling stuff. In addition, watching these old, familiar faces play a more active role in the narrative, A, makes them feel less superfluous by giving them something to do, and B, is personally satisfying to someone like me, who grew up loving the first two X-Men movies. However, it's difficult to deny that calling this version the Rogue Cut is a little misleading, as Rogue is just one member of a large ensemble and therefore has a fairly limited amount of screen time. It would be like if the extended edition of the second Hobbit film was called The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, The Thrain Cut. Well, Thrain is barely in the movie, so naturally, you don't call it that. Despite this, when we weigh in the pros and cons, both versions of this film are roughly on the same level of quality. The theatrical cut has a tighter story and is generally more focused, while the Rogue cut spends more time developing the characters and the setting. Again, it mainly comes down to which one you prefer. Seeing as it incorporates more of the characters that make up this universe and offers a better balance between the two time periods, the Rogue cut personally feels like a more complete experience to me. Fortunately, whatever weaknesses found here are completely overshadowed by the amount of content that you get. First and foremost, this set includes both versions of the film, so if you're not a fan of one, then you can just watch the other. On top of that, there are 2 commentary tracks that you can listen to. The one for the theatrical cut features director Bryan Singer and writer Simon Kinberg, while the one for the Rogue cut features singer and editor/composer John Ottman. These are fairly entertaining and informative as the filmmakers take us through their process of planning, crafting, and shooting each scene. On the second disc, we have Mutant vs. Machine, a series of 9 segments that cover numerous behind-the-scenes aspects of the film, from the original idea to production design to editing, as well as a few ideas of where they're going with the next one. This is in stark contrast to the original Blu-ray release, in which the special features mainly focused on the movie's premise and the cast being reunited. That's all fine and good, but what we get here is far more substantial. Another draw is X-Men Unguarded, which is basically a discussion involving most of the cast, along with Singer and Kinberg, about their experiences making the film. Sadly, Anna Paquin is once again absent from this, even though she was with the rest of the cast at the 2013 Comic-Con, which is where this feature was filmed. In spite of that, it's fairly interesting to hear each person's approach to his or her character. We also learn about their unique perspectives on the franchise as a whole. Further icing on the cake comes in the form of concept art, costumes, and storyboards. Oh, and there's a sneak peek of the Fantastic Four reboot if you actually care about that. All in all, X-Men Days of Future Past, the Rogue cut, may not reach the heights of some other extended flicks, but the greater offering of special features ultimately makes it a more worthwhile package than the original. Thanks for watching, feel free to like, subscribe, and/or comment. Until next time.